Recently, my husband Andrew, who is somewhat older than me, unexpectedly asked me to move out of our home because my parents were living with us. I was taken aback and quite puzzled by his sudden demand. He even went so far as to threaten me with divorce if I resisted his request. Over the past few weeks, he had become more withdrawn, and our relationship had accumulated its share of grievances. Despite me covering all our living expenses amounting to $2,900 monthly, he seemed to disregard this completely. I was utterly shocked when he expressed that his parents would be uncomfortable with my presence, a reason that made little sense to me. However, I acquiesced to his demand, packed my belongings, and left, noticing a sense of relief in him as I did so. Immediately after leaving, I contacted a resale shop to manage my things. My name is Isabella, and I live with my husband Andrew. We first met through mutual friends and quickly formed a connection. One of our first encounters involved him sharing his aspiration to become a voice actor, something that captivated me given his charming voice. After exchanging phone numbers, we began spending more time together and soon found ourselves in a relationship, though we never formally acknowledged it. Fresh out of college at the time, I was drawn to the idea of a relationship with someone more mature. It felt like stepping into a more adult phase of my life. My best friend Doris expressed concerns about the age difference since Andrew is 4 years older, but I reassured her, citing that many relationships thrive despite age gaps. I genuinely enjoyed Andrew's company, and he seemed to reciprocate my feelings, so I didn't see a reason to worry. After about 2 years of dating, the topic of marriage came up. I had already introduced him to my parents and briefed them about our age difference, which piqued their curiosity about him. Amidst all these discussions about our future, I often wondered when he would propose. Eventually, he did, during a casual evening at my apartment. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, but it was genuine, and it marked a new beginning for us. When Andrew proposed, it was in such a casual way that I simply responded with a cheerful, "Sure, let's get married." It reflected our laid-back approach to life, which suited both of us just fine. Following the proposal, we made trips to visit each other's families. However, I didn't exactly gel with Andrew's relatives. Their home was cluttered with items that appeared to be antiques, though I suspected they were merely replicas. When I first met Andrew's parents, they were decked out in luxurious branded clothing and ostentatious jewelry, epitomizing a wealthy couple. It became apparent that our tastes and values were worlds apart. Andrew's mother even made a disparaging remark about my appearance, which was quite a shock, but I reassured myself that as long as Andrew and I were content, I wouldn't need to interact much with his family. After our wedding, we settled into a condo, but I noticed Andrew seemed unusually anxious. One day, he curiously inquired about a woman in a blue dress from our wedding. Confused, I mentioned there were several guests in blue, unsure of whom he meant. He specified he was asking about the one who had given a speech as my best friend. Realizing he meant Doris, I confirmed it, noting she had worn a blue dress. Andrew's interest seemed peculiar when he asked about her, explaining he thought he had seen someone who resembled her recently and recalled her speech. His sudden curiosity about Doris was puzzling, but before I could delve deeper, he simply chuckled it off and retreated to his room. Later, Doris called with some exciting news. Her boyfriend was planning to return to the United States next year. They had been a couple since high school and had known each other since elementary school, sharing a long and deep connection. Doris's boyfriend had moved away during middle school, but despite the distance, they kept in touch through letters. They reunited in high school, where he confessed his love for her. I always enjoyed listening to Doris's romantic tales. Her boyfriend had been working overseas for several years, having been transferred to an international branch after some time in the United States. Despite the geographical gap, their relationship remained strong, fortified by consistent communication. Curiously, I asked Doris if she thought her boyfriend might propose upon his return, hinting at a potential wedding. Laughing, Doris teased me for jumping ahead, but she playfully insisted that I be prepared to make a memorable speech at her wedding just as she had done at mine. We enjoyed a lighthearted moment over tea, reveling in the ease of our friendship where we could discuss anything and trust in each other's support. During this period, I started noticing changes in Andrew's routine. He was coming home increasingly late. When I commented on his late hours, he retorted that just because we were married, it didn't mean he shouldn't work. Although he was still chasing his dream to become a voice actor, the reality was that he worked various part-time jobs to fund his classes, seeing little immediate return. Consequently, I shouldered all our living expenses, making it difficult for us to save any money. Over time, it became clear that Andrew was not prepared to give up his aspirations for the sake of our family's financial stability. My worries intensified with his prolonged work hours, fearing that his part-time job was demanding too much overtime. When I expressed my concerns, suggesting that they might be overworking him, Andrew dismissed me briskly, insisting he had everything under control and that the extra money was beneficial. His curt reply ended the conversation abruptly, and I noticed a shift in how he addressed me, no longer using my name, just referring to me impersonally as you. This subtle change added a layer of coldness to our interactions, heightening my concerns about where we were headed as a couple. When Andrew and I got married, I imagined he would continue to speak to me with kindness, but following our wedding, his demeanor shifted drastically. His once soothing, deep voice became grating and harsh, an effect I suspected was due to excessive drinking. Considering he was an aspiring voice actor, this lifestyle seemed detrimental to his vocal health, and I worried about his well-being. Despite my concerns, Andrew appeared indifferent and began to distance himself from me, often ignoring me entirely at home. It was around this time that my friend Doris reached out, wanting to discuss something important. Given my personal concerns, I proposed we meet at a private karaoke booth to talk undisturbed. Doris seemed particularly cautious about her choice of room, selecting one that allowed a clear view of the staff from the door. Curious, I asked her why she had chosen this particular spot. She explained that she had felt someone following her ever since she quit her job a month ago. Choosing a room with visibility allowed the staff to keep an eye out for any suspicious individuals who might be lurking nearby. I asked if she had involved the police. Doris replied that she had tried, but without any physical contact or direct threats, the police were limited in how they could help. She planned to discuss the matter with her boyfriend when he returned in a month, but in the meantime, she wanted to confide in someone close by. Doris hadn't seen her stalker clearly, too frightened to make out whether it was a man or a woman. I promised to help her keep a lookout, hoping to identify the person tailing her. Through my observations, I shockingly discovered that the individual following Doris was none other than my husband, Andrew. Despite his claims of working late, he had been spending his evenings lurking near Doris's workplace, following her after his shifts ended. This revelation was a heavy burden, and while I had planned to discuss my strained relationship with Andrew, uncovering his disturbing behavior became the immediate priority. The situation was far more serious than I had anticipated, leaving me to grapple with both my crumbling marriage and the safety of my dear friend. The day I found out that Andrew was the one stalking Doris was a profound shock, a betrayal that shattered my trust completely. Watching him follow my best friend with a creepy, unsettling grin was chilling. I had loved and married this man, but in that instant my feelings evaporated, leaving a cold void where affection once resided. I immediately confided in Doris about the discovery, and together we took swift action to ensure her safety. With assistance from her coworkers, arrangements were made for her to be discreetly driven from the underground parking lot of her workplace to her new residence, helping her stay out of Andrew's reach. As Doris and I implemented these security measures, I could see Andrew's irritation mounting. One day, his frustration erupted. Out of nowhere, Andrew demanded that I leave our home to make room for his parents, threatening divorce if I resisted. His audacity was astounding, especially considering that I was the one covering our living expenses, a hefty $2,900 monthly. I wondered if he even remembered or cared about that fact. As I stared at him incredulously, his patience snapped and he lost his temper completely, shouting for me to leave so his parents could move in. Stunned yet resolute, I replied, "Fine, but I'm taking everything I purchased with me." The moment I agreed to leave, Andrew instructed me to hurry. Wasting no time, I contacted a local buyback service to handle the removal of my belongings. When they arrived the next day to assess the items, Andrew watched, initially smug in his assumption that I was simply conceding defeat. However, his smugness quickly turned to shock as he realized that nearly all the furniture in our apartment was being evaluated for removal, furniture that I had paid for. This upheaval underscored the deep rift between us, highlighting not just a failing marriage but a profound misunderstanding and disrespect that had been festering beneath the surface. As the buyback service carried away piece after piece, it symbolized the dismantling of the life and home we had tried to build together. After the staff finished evaluating all the items in our apartment, excluding those in Andrew's personal room, they presented me with a quote. The total value of the furniture and appliances amounted to $30,000. Without hesitation, I signed the document to proceed with the sale. This decision seemed to snap Andrew back to reality, and in a moment of panic, he grabbed my arm. "Wait, why are you selling everything? My parents are supposed to live here. How will they manage without furniture?" I pulled away from his grasp sharply. "What do you mean? When we got married, you were so broke from your acting classes that you practically begged me to cover the rent, the furniture, and all our living expenses. I didn't realize just how broke you were. I feel deceived." I reminded him pointedly about the $2,900 monthly expenses I had been paying. "From now on, you'll need to cover those expenses, especially with your parents moving in. It'll likely be even more," I stated firmly. Andrew's face turned pale, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. "You thought you could bring up money and I'd back out of the divorce? Who do you think you are?" He then defensively added, "I've already found a wealthy woman." Processing Andrew's revelation about his relationship with a wealthy woman, I began to suspect he might be confusing his stalker-like behavior towards Doris as a close relationship. If he considered that closeness, he was severely mistaken. Doris, indeed, came from a wealthy background. Her grandfather was a successful businessman, and her father now managed the family business. Doris was the epitome of a perfect heiress, yet she never flaunted her wealth. She lived modestly, just like me and our friends, and no one judged her based on her family's money. It dawned on me that Andrew might have learned about Doris's affluent background and misconstrued it, considering his skewed perception and desperate actions. This understanding added a layer of sadness and irony to the whole situation, revealing not just the dissolution of our marriage, but also the delusions and deceit that had underpinned Andrew's intentions from the start. Andrew's assumption that Doris would be a better match for him because of her wealth was both absurd and infuriating. Wealth does not define someone's value, particularly not in matters of the heart. Yet, Andrew seemed to think it did, a notion that only fueled my frustration. I knew for a fact that Doris would never entertain the idea of marrying someone like him. She had been with her boyfriend since high school, who was set to return to the States soon. "They'll probably get married," I informed Andrew, who was clearly shocked to learn that his supposed closeness with Doris was nothing more than his delusion, and she found his behavior unsettling. "But I always walked Doris home," Andrew tried to justify, clinging to any connection he thought he had. "You should consider yourself lucky you weren't reported to the police," I shot back. "But I didn't know she had a boyfriend. He's been abroad," Andrew protested weakly. "They've been pen pals since elementary school, and they talk nearly every day. And unlike you, who's been working part-time jobs, her boyfriend is a successful man, even recognized by her father. I declared, highlighting the stark contrast between him and Doris's boyfriend. As the buyback workers removed the furniture and appliances, Andrew tried to recover his poise. "I guess you're all I have left. You'll support my dream of becoming a voice actor forever, right?" he asked, attempting a charming pose. I met his question with a cold stare. "Excuse me, I've already visited a divorce lawyer and started the process. Let's communicate through our attorneys from now on." Andrew, perhaps thinking I still had feelings for him, clung to my waist. "Don't say things like that. Haven't we been getting along all this time?" he pleaded. "Getting along? Ever since you found out about my best friend Doris being a wealthy heiress, you've been distant and started hanging around her," I retorted, making it clear that his actions were transparent and self-serving. His misguided pursuit of wealth through relationships had unraveled everything, and it was time for me to move forward without him, grounded in reality and self-respect. It became clear to me that marrying you was a mistake shortly after our wedding vows. Tears streamed down Andrew's face as he sobbed uncontrollably, his behavior more reminiscent of a child than a man 4 years my senior. Watching him cry like that only deepened the rift in my fading feelings for him. I found myself unable to even share a room with him without feeling suffocated. "I just can't do this anymore," I said, frustration lining my voice. In a matter-of-fact tone, I continued, "By the way, I've spoken to your uncle about our divorce, the one who owns this apartment we're renting." Andrew's face fell as he realized the gravity of the situation. "My uncle? But you know how strict he is," he replied, panic evident in his voice. I responded coolly, "Considering I've been paying for our rent and living expenses, your uncle suggested finding you a job when I leave. This means I won't be able to continue my voice acting classes either." Andrew rarely practiced, and it seemed futile to continue pursuing something he wasn't fully committed to. "Maybe it's time for you to face reality," I added. "If you bother Doris again, I won't hesitate to call the police," I warned him sternly, my resolve steeling. With a firm step, I walked out of the house, determined never to return. My initial plan was to move back to my parents' house, but I also considered finding a new place closer to work if the opportunity presented itself. As for Andrew, his uncle did indeed find him a job at his company shortly after our separation. Interestingly, Andrew's parents, who had been hoping to benefit from their son's marriage to a wealthy family, also moved into the apartment and started working for the uncle. It seemed like opportunism ran in their family. I felt a sense of relief having left such a toxic situation behind. While the age difference had never bothered me, the experience underscored the importance of choosing my next partner with greater care. On a brighter note, once the dust had settled with Andrew, I received a wedding invitation from Doris. She introduced me to her longtime boyfriend, and I sincerely wished them every happiness. Though my first marriage was a misstep, I harbored hopes for Doris's union to be joyful and enduring.